had recently watched this China's Got Talent singing competition where this kid came on stage and said, my 梦想 or my dream is to have this ink that turns the whole world green with grass, because he was from the Mongolian grasslands and he loved the idea of like having freedom through a green world. And I was like, that is such a beautiful thing. And I realized the one thing that I love most is making people that I love feel really loved or just feel happy. So my superhero power that I would want to have, if I could have it, is the ability to just touch someone, and it has to be like a physical touch. It can't just be a thought, like a poke, that would make them instantly feel warm and fuzzy inside. So I know before this podcast started, I mentioned potentially wanting to go into teaching or into motivational speaking. And that is because, number one, I think the coolest job in the world is to get paid for talking, because I love talking. And second, because I love the feeling of making someone happy or inspiring someone in a one-on-one setting or in a small group setting. So not something a philanthropist necessarily does, and which is why I'm thinking more along the lines of teaching or speaking for small groups.
Interesting. So is that what you're trying to go through with your book? You're trying to actually show people, this is what I went through. Here are the trials and tribulations that I went through, and here's how you could come out of it. Here's how you could become inspired by my story.
Yeah, I would definitely say it's definitely the former, where I'm explaining what the hell I just went through as a 21-year-old. But I don't claim to have all the answers. I think that's the important part. I'm never going to be the one that will help anyone else fix their own problems. But I think I just want to say, like, everyone has problems. I have problems, and it's totally okay to have them. It's natural. It's good to have those. And one thing that I think is different about my collection of personal essays to a lot of other more famous or more well-known ones is that I'm writing from a point of confusion, from a point of youth. A lot of people write reflections on what has happened long ago in the past, hindsight 2020. But because I'm living in a lot of that confusion right now, I'm really just exploring, what is the important and the urgent and essential message that I feel right now that is important, and whoever reads it can do whatever they want with it. If it inspires them, that's awesome. Like, of course I would, that is the dream, but I definitely don't claim to say, if you do exactly what I did, you will have a good life.
Well, of course, I think everyone goes to their own story, but at the same time, there's that sort of development that comes through. I'm assuming that you start your book from a time when you're at a very young age, and you go through an absolute personal transformation, right? So, what do you think was actually the thing that in your life gave you that like incredible transformation? Like, I am now growing up and turning into the person that I'm going to become.
Yeah, that's a really good one. I would say that the first one was probably when my sister left for college and I was the only kid left in the household. And I finally realized that I did not need to be comparing myself to someone like her every step of the way. Growing up, I did exactly what my sister did. And I would work my butt off to beat her, almost, in a sense. I feel like every sibling story has this sort of dynamic. Yeah, but as soon as she left, I was like, oh my God, I am not her. I am my own person. It's a cliche, but cliches are cliches because they are true. So that was definitely the first point where I was like, oh, I don't really like science. I like history and English. And, I'm not, she's a little bit more introverted on the shyer side. And I was like, I'm actually really loud, and I want to see how, my extroversion makes me different, makes me unique. And the second one I mentioned earlier was definitely the first biggest failure of my life that did not end up being a failure at all, which was going to NYU. Now I'm just so incredibly grateful to have graduated from NYU. I feel very lucky. I would say I'm actually very grateful for all the colleges who said no to me, because that led to one of the best yeses that I've ever heard. And then the third, and probably most important for me now, has been my struggle with and my diagnosis of and my recovery for my eating disorder. I had been struggling with it ever since junior year of high school, and I was just so good at convincing everyone that I was totally fine when I clearly was not. And now I feel a lot less apologetic about feeling things like anxiety or any sort of mental stigma. I no longer really have. So those three, I would say, make up my life now. Just family, failures that don't end up being failures, and the sort of daily mental struggle that I have that I actually think is very meaningful in the end.
Interesting. So during your eating disorder, did you actually find that you, even though you're a very, very introspective person, from what I could tell, because you write all the time, but at the same time, did you find that you sort of denied it from yourself and you sort of like pushed it away?
Absolutely. I think that was the biggest part of it. As sort of this type A person, I really wanted control over everything, and that included my body. I convinced myself that losing 20 pounds in like a very short amount of time was normal. I convinced myself that just, I don't know how detailed you want me to get here, but there were a lot of really gross things. Yeah, there were a lot of really weird things happening to my body. One was that I was freezing all the time. Another one was that I would sort of have this acid reflux of things coming up and I was just like, oh, this is all normal. Like, this is totally fine. And nothing about that was fine. When I look back at old photos, I thought I was still so incredibly fat, but I looked like a twig. And there was my sister was like, Amy, you feel like a skeleton that I could snap. I did not appreciate that commentary at the time, but then I spent 2 months regaining 20 pounds. And I was like,
wow,
I must look like a whale. And I went back to school the next semester and everyone was like, wow, Amy, you sound a lot calmer and much more mature and happier. And you just look happier. No one commented about my weight. And I was like, wow, it was all in my head. So yes, it was definitely a realization that the biggest critic of your life will always be yourself. Yeah. And that if you can fight that voice, if you can work with it, and if you can learn to love it, then you really don't have to worry about like any other critics.
It's true, because like for all of us, right? Like we're like the center of our own stories essentially, right? Like we're perceiving everything through us. So I could understand how like, yeah, in your life, you're like, all right, everyone's focused on me. Everyone, really, really looks at me and, judges me at every single point. But I agree. Like, I don't think we're that important. And I think it's really cool how you sort of, even throughout like your years, I think it's important that you went from like really focused and stressed about what other people think of you to still caring about whatever people think about you. But now you're still humble about it. Now you're just like, you know what, if they think this thing about me, it's all right. It's whatever.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. You put it so much better. You think you're the center of the universe, and then you realize no one cares about you as much as you think they do. And that was probably the biggest revelation I had with my eating disorder. It's just, wow, it's so great that no one really cares as much as I think they do, because you're right, everyone is the center of their own story. So of course they're going to be thinking much more about how people perceive themselves and how they're perceiving me.
That's so awesome. I think that's one of the most incredible realizations, because it's like, we are not that important. We really aren't. But at the same time, we're all contributing to that same good, and we're all doing that one. We're all adding to a better sense of, like all of our loved ones really care about us, and there's this sense of like balancing. Everyone really cares about me, but people don't care about me that much.
Yes, exactly. Very well put.
So I did want to switch gears, and I wanted to talk about your time at NYU and sort of like the time where you pushed on and you really started to discover yourself even more. So first of all, you were a Fulbright Scholar, which is absolutely incredible. Congratulations. I would love for you to talk about that, and I'd also love for you to talk about what your experience was like when you traveled to 25 different countries on your semesters abroad and learned probably so much, and I definitely want to hear about it all.
I'll go in order. So for the Fulbright Scholarship, I applied for that this past year with the understanding that it would give me another year to just explore myself. There's I definitely have my reservations about doing any sort of fellowship that claims that they're really, really helping the people that you're going to teach. So I'll be teaching English in Taiwan. And yes, I'll get to be working with kids and hopefully I leave some sort of impression on their lives. But really, I think any scholarship is how it affects myself. And it definitely is more of a selfish lens, but I think you just have to look at it like that when the entire point of my applying is really, how is this going to change my reason for being? How is this going to move me forward? And as I said to you earlier, I am considering teaching, and I absolutely love English. I'm such good friends with a lot of my old English teachers. We text all the time, and I'm like, if I love English and if I love teaching, or if I think I like teaching, then let me just apply for something that will let me do both of them together.